This week on Casual Watch Talk podcast, we do our wristwatch check and our watch obsessions and some more surprising watch obsessions. Should quartz be more prevalent with watch microbrands? Keep listening to find out more. Hey everyone, welcome back to this week's episode of Casual Watch Talk podcast. Todd, thanks for joining me again.
I'm so excited. We're having a blast doing this. Let's go.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, everyone, for all of the nice comments. We haven't got any to read out yet, so keep them coming on the email questions. I've had a lot of nice comments, but not specific questions, so definitely email us over Casual Watch Reviews. If you're watching this on Spotify, leave a comment. We'd really appreciate a review on iTunes as well. That would really help get this channel out. And I know I know since the last time that I started this, Todd, I think there's a lot more watch podcasts out there, so we really appreciate all the listeners that are tuning back into this. But yeah, the landscape wasn't almost as crowded as last time.
Well, yeah, I would say that those guys, the number one, they have shown that this is a viable marketplace, and I think a lot of people have decided, yeah, I want to be a part of that too. But when you have all we're hoping is we'll rise to the top.
Yeah, and that's a good thing. Also, Ricky and Dave over at Scottish Watches, the number one podcast, they're so generous with their time. And Dave joins us on the live stream, and Ricky behind the scenes is always on WhatsApp. If I've got a question or whatever, he jumps straight on there. The real gentlemen of this game. For sure.
Their show's really enjoyable as well as our show.
Yes.
But like I said, it's just been one of those things that seems to have blown up because they have made it so almost mainstream.
Yeah, ours is a little bit more rustic, or is that what it would be? Or,
no, artisanal.
Artisanal. Ours is an artisanal podcast on watches.
Yes,
it's we try hard to make it seem effortless.
Correct. Exactly right.
Yeah, there's a lot of planning that goes into our random tangents.
Yes.
Well, let's kick it off with the wristwatch check. What are you wearing this week?
Today I kind of dug back into one of my favorites that I bought a few years ago, and I have always loved this watch, and this is a permanent part of my collection. It's the Citizen Nighthawk. It's a classic. It really, I don't know if they still do. This is the one that had the 12 and the 6 on it, and when I bought it because I was like, it has a very strong Breitling vibe without being an homage. You know what I mean? But it has that really handsome look. And it's I don't know how Citizen does it. 200 meters of water resistance, pilot watch, dual time zone. I think it's actually what we would consider although it's not the same stack, a true GMT, because you can adjust the hour hand independently, and then the 24-hour dial is something different. It's a great watch. I don't think ever in my lifetime will figure out what to do with that slide rule around the outer bezel edge, but it's sure neat and it's fidgety. So yeah, it's a permanent part of my collection. I just love this watch. I would recommend it to anybody.
Well, we might be doing a future video episode, or I might be doing a future video episode with TJ, who was a naval aviator in the US Navy. He's talked about the slide rule and saying that they have charts that they...
Sure.
But he said if you have to use it, you're in trouble, type of thing.
This is a real bad day if you're using the slide rule.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And he said because the vibration of the plane and especially at night, you wouldn't be able to see it anyway. But
it's super finicky.
Yeah, I've made a comment jokingly about the slide rule bezel on the channel before, and apparently people use it for currency conversion and different things. So there is other things other than just the fuel and the distance or whatever's supposed to be on it. There's people said that they've used it for currency conversion, which I think would be cool, I suppose, if you worked it out.
That's a lot smarter person than me, I can tell you that. I don't know how they work that out. I do remember too, it was about 2 years ago, I was getting on a plane coming back home from a work trip, and I saw a pilot on his cell phone standing out talking on a cell phone, and he had the Nighthawk on, and I actually went up like a complete nerd, like, oh my gosh, an actual pilot wearing a Nighthawk, and he got a big smile on his face, and we talked for a little bit. Then I let him get back to his phone call, but he was thrilled.
The only time I've seen one, and I know plenty of people have this watch, but I saw one on TV. My wife is a huge fan of the dating shows that are on Netflix, and they have one called Married at First Sight, and it wasn't this season, it was a season or so ago, and one of the guys who got married had the Nighthawk on his watch the wedding day, but I felt really bad for him because they meet at the altar. that's the first time they even see each other. They don't know that anyone's names. Have you seen the show? You know the premise of it?
No, I firmly stamp my man card. I have never watched one of those.
Well, this one would have made you would have felt empathy on behalf, because as soon as the wife saw him at the altar, she was like, "This is not happening.
Oh,
this is." And as soon as he got totally rejected at the altar, she wouldn't. The honeymoon wasn't happening. The honeymoon suite wasn't happening. But it's so funny. A lot of the guys, they go in there really flash, like, oh yeah, I'm a reformed player and all this, and you can tell straight away by looking at the watches. I think the Navajo guy was really nice, which is like a Navajo owner, I think. But then you get a lot of that. There's a lot of Invicta on there. There was one guy that he was a bit full of himself, but he wore the gold G-Shock square on the wedding day and stuff. So it's so funny watching some of the watches that these guys that are really flash also think the watches are flash, or that they're classy, I guess, because you can have a flash watch that's affordable, but some of the crap that they wear thinking that they're ballers.
Well, Invicta has done a good job of convincing people. If you're not like really paying attention, the way they talk about them on those shopping networks and the way they pump those up, I think a lot of people don't realize what they're buying.
One of the ironies of watch collecting, isn't it, or being a watch aficionado, is the most watches that you're going to see in the wild that look flash are Invicta, aren't they? I mean, maybe it's just because I live in Florida, but I see a lot of Invicta.
No, yeah, Invicta is real common, and then trying to think of what else, like the department store ones.
Yeah,
you know, any of those departments, just those cheap kind of Quartz department store watches that look, they have a brand name on it, a designer name on them, and you go, yeah, but that's honestly like a $5 AliExpress watch.
Well, I forget who it is, but there's a company, isn't there, that make Kate Spade, the Lacoste watches, the Adidas watches. They make most of the sports fashion crossover watches, because there's an outlet mall here that's got them all in the window.
Oh, of course. Yeah, I don't know who it is, but yeah, there's probably all coming from similar house. Yeah.
Well, there we go. We went off at a bit of a tangent there.
A little bit.
Yeah. So I'm wearing my Seiko, my Quartz solar watch, which will bring us on to a bit more of our subject today. I put it on a NATO. This isn't really a strap monster, I would say, just because it is large and flat, so it does flex a little bit on other straps, but I've been wearing it on a NATO. I'm actually waiting for some NATOs to come in from the strap mill Canada, and I haven't been doing a lot of watch strap reviews, and to be honest, I probably won't do this as its own video. I'll probably just talk about it a bit on the live stream when I get them. But the reason I agreed to doing them is that 2 years ago now, they started doing those limited edition, the Ukraine NATO straps, and I got a couple off them, and then sent one to Mikola at Man Cave Leather. So I'm happy to support them. They raised a lot of money and did a lot of good there.
Nice.
Okay, so we did our wristwatch checks. Now let's do our watch obsession.
So I have two this week. One snuck up on me and one has been building. Like they've been teasing it. It's a Kickstarter one. And I've mentioned this brand before, and I know you've had a relationship with Sega Design. They have come out with a new watch, and all of a sudden, I can't remember the name of it, but it's the first time I've seen them actually engineer their own bracelet as well. And this watch is a really sharp look. It's a departure from the one that I currently own in that it has much less of sort of that trying to be a Richard Mille, and it's its own thing. It's the Hunter. The Z Series Hunter. The lines on it are really cool. The way they float the movement in the middle is everything about this watch I really like. And the price isn't terrible, especially if you back it now. I think the end retail price might be a little high, but I think Sega's earning it. $549 is not crazy, especially with the bracelet, but at $389, I just think it's a steal. It's a great looking watch, and it's a very considered movement. The way they designed it, the one I have, it's kind of fills up the case. This one, it's like the movement's kind of floating there in the middle, and I don't know, I just think it's stunning. And then the other one, it totally snuck up on me, and I found it on Instagram, and well done to Mark over at Long Island Watches. I didn't see this coming, and I've never been a huge fan of sort of their original designs. This one, the dress watch, tonneau case, I don't know what this looks like. I mean, you probably, because it's not a Cartier, but it's got that vibe, that Art Deco vibe, cathedral style handset, and it's the right size. You know, it's not crazy bulky. Just out of nowhere. And again, $329. And it has a manual wind. I think what it is a manual wind, not an automatic movement. And it's a Miyota, but a 9 series, the 9039. That movement, and such a good looking watch. I was totally taken aback when I saw it on my Instagram. I mean, I was immediately like going down a rabbit hole. What is this? Where did this come from? What does it look like? And they said it's their own kind of ground up watch.
Yeah, and I'll leave a link in the description down below. Yeah, very much more classic than the other designs that they've done. They've definitely done tool watches, haven't they? And dive watches in the past, but this one definitely looks more classic. There's Hamiltons that look a little bit like that, aren't they, I think?
Maybe it's like that Bolton we talked about in last week's episode. It's a little bit like that, yeah. But again, it has its own DNA. And I hope, don't hate me, Mark. I was never a fan of the the Islander logo, but I like the way it was handled on here. It was it has this classy vibe all the way through.
No, that's a new interesting one. And yeah, I'm glad that he's having a lot of fun with these designs and stuff. And I know TGV's helping him out with a few of the designs. I wonder whether this is a collab one with them as well, maybe.
I'd be curious, yeah.
Well, my watch obsession is, I don't know if it is a watch obsession. I bizarrely went down a rabbit hole, and I don't know whether I'm just because I'm getting a little bit older that I've suddenly looked at this watch again. I will probably never buy one just because of the cost, but I started really deep diving into the Cartier Santos. Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? There's something about the one, it's the one that has a DLC bezels almost, because they're a right scratch magnet, I think. The Santos.
Especially in those medium to large sizes, it really, I know that everybody's going to say, look, a man can wear a small watch, and you can, but after a while you look down and it just feels like I'm wearing a small watch, and for me personally, I'm not comfortable with it. But those other sizes that they have of that, it is a great looking watch with a suit or with a t-shirt.
Do you know what I think is funny? I was on Watch Crunch, which I've been doing a little bit more on Watch Crunch, so follow me over there. It's the name of the podcast, Casual Watch Talk. Somebody posted a picture of the Pogue, the 6139 Seiko Pogue, and then a new Seiko chronograph, but it was the new solar chronograph. And the comment was around, and a shout out to that, I forget who it is that commented, but a shout out if you're listening. The comment was, I wish Seiko would make watches as streamlined as they're basically too big now, is what the comment was. So I posted a picture of the Seiko 6139 Pogue that I've got, the blue Pogue, next to the speed timer that I ended up selling to you. They're the same size. It's a myth that I think that those chronographs were smaller. They're actually more svelte now, I suppose you would say, because of the quartz movements. I mean, they did do, but the fact that comparison, and I think that a lot of people, they put, we're going to, it's fashion. Big watches were a fashion, and we're going to smaller watches. But I think that we'll never go back to men wearing small watches. It's like cars, isn't it? You've got especially in America and even in England, everyone is now SUV is a small car and a truck is a big car. Nobody's going to go back to, I mean, I love a Mini, but the vast majority of the US isn't going to go back to, they stopped selling the Fiesta, didn't they? The Fiat 500, a Fiat in its last legs in the US in terms of its, they think they're going to pull out. There's not a time, I don't think, where we're going to go back to a smaller, the mass majority of people are going to go back to smaller cars. And that's what I think about watches. I think it's a myth that men in particular, I guess, and even women, that the unisex sizes now are a lot bigger than what I think it's a myth that small watches are going to replace the market that for people that wore bigger watches. Now, there's a level. It's come down to a balance of 39 being probably the size of the size of a watch, whereas perhaps 50 years ago or whatever, it was the smaller the better, wasn't it? It was probably 35 mil was.
They were 34.
Yeah, 34, 35. Whereas I think now there's definitely examples on both sides of watches. But I don't think that we'll ever go back to the majority of watch wearers wearing smaller watches. I don't think we'll see those Muhammad Ali. We certainly wouldn't see whoever the most famous boxer is at the moment wearing a small Cartier like Muhammad Ali did.
No, he's wearing Invicta.
Yeah.
No, but the truth is, you see it with the really eccentric Hollywood types. I've seen that a few times where they're wearing, I saw someone wearing even like what was a woman's size Cartier watch. It looked just minuscule on his wrist. And to me, that's immediately distracting. It's almost as distracting as one of those gargantuan Invictus where you're just like, it looks out of place. That being said, I do have a 36 millimeter that I wear as a dress watch. I like that, but it's not like a daily. 34, I had 34 Omega Seamaster. Well, gosh, it was a beautiful watch, but I just never felt like comfortable in my skin when I was wearing it. I was like, it just looks like this tiny little watch on my wrist. Now, that being said, the Tudor Black Bay 36, like that really popular one, that doesn't look small in a mirror or in a picture. And Rolex has figured out a way to make, just like Seiko makes big cases fit small, Rolex has figured out a way to make small cases look big. And I don't know what that little secret sauce is that they've got, but they've figured out something where it works. A 36 looks like, oh, that's a man's watch. I don't know how they do it.
And we talked about this with smartwatches, didn't we? Where the smart technology is usually that things go smaller, isn't they? Or they go more compact, don't they, over time? But the iPhone suddenly bigger is better. Whereas the late 90s, early 2000s, I mean, we couldn't get enough of those tiny candy bar Nokias. Well, you look cool.
Oh, yeah.
Look really cool with one of those. And the same thing with the smartwatch now. This was one of the problems we had when I was buying the new Apple Watch for my wife, which we were really concerned that now 42 is the small size, but it fits her. Yeah. So I don't think we'll ever go back to. Maybe I'll be proven wrong, but I don't feel comfortable. I had that Grand Seiko, that smaller Grand Seiko that was 36, and I just don't like wearing a smaller watch because at the end of the day they are superfluous, aren't they? Watches in terms of you've got the time all over the place. So I don't know why I have to compromise on size for any reason other than that it's not seen as having a big watch is not seen as not classy. I don't think, maybe.
Well, but it's also one of those things, everybody, especially when they're new to watch collecting, think everybody's going to notice my watch. No one notices your watch. No one's paying attention to your watch. So I'm wearing the watch specifically for me. So I want to enjoy the watch. The watch, if I'm not comfortable with the size, that's a me thing. And the listeners may think I'm crazy, and someone may be bashing their head against the dashboard right now, going like, "What do you mean a 34 is too small?" And I'm like, it's personal preference.
Yeah, because you did a 2-for-1. I will also do a 2-for-1 on this watch obsessions. I'd never seen this podcast before, but it's called the Sean Ryan Show. He's an Navy SEAL that became a CIA officer. The interviews that he has where he brings on special operators from all over the world. I'm just watching him interview the last remaining member of the Iwo Jima World War II flamethrower crew that they went out. Apparently those flamethrowers at Iwo Jima, the Americans, they had a 4-minute life expectancy as soon as they hit that beach. Yeah, it was obscene. Out of his company, there's over 300 Marines. 18 of them came back. All of the officers died that day.
That guy has amazing interviews, and I think he puts a real person behind some of these things that people like to sort of go like, oh, that's. They may have preconceived notions about police or whatever else. And then when you hear these guys tell their individual stories, you start to go like, this is a tough job, tough work.
Yeah, amazing stories. He gets them to do their EDC every episode. And he did his own EDC. So he talked about a Rolex and how they would have a role. It was funny because he was a SEAL and then a former CIA contractor. So he talked about how he would have a Rolex. He saw that as an asset if he got in trouble. But then he had another CIA member on who was a deep undercover spy called Andrew Bustamante. If you've seen him, he's got really crazy curly hair now that he's out. And they were having a discussion about, is a Rolex a barter if you get in trouble? That Sean was saying, yes, $10,000 anyway. Rolex is a well-known name. If you're in a pinch, you could swap a Rolex for something. And then Andrew was saying, well, actually, for us, it wouldn't have been a barter tool because if we get caught, we have to be found with things that our cover would be found with. So if I'm a businessman or if I'm a tourist, so my EDC has to represent that. He said also the work that he was doing, Rolex is too much of a barter. So he would always carry cash with him. So it was quite an interesting perspective. But the reason that I went on this tangent was, as well as the Rolex, he also showed a watch that I have always wanted, but I've never pulled the trigger on it because I just think it's cool, was the Breitling Emergency.
Oh, right.
So I didn't realize that they shut the frequency off halfway through. So that fear, if you get one of the old ones, that you might accidentally set it off. Actually, the older ones, you can't set them off anyway, I don't think. But I just went back through a rabbit hole of looking at those old. They're just so cool. They're one of the few watches that if James Bond had it would actually do something in real life. It had that SOS beacon, doesn't it, where you pull the antennas out, and if you accidentally set it off, it costs you like 20 grand or something. But he was saying that he wore one in the CIA so that if he was really in a pinch, he never had to use it, but he was saying if you're really in a pinch, that's what he wore, which I thought was pretty cool. So I went down a rabbit hole looking at them, but they're still really expensive. They're still $4,500 for a Breitling. Apparently they're bringing it back, he mentioned as well, but I haven't seen a new one. Apparently Breitling stopped it, but then they bought it back.
That's an interesting move, only because Apple has made that so ubiquitous in their current watches. You have that satellite function that you can from anywhere you can get saved. So, or it's, I don't know if I think it's in the Ultra, but I know it's in the phones too. So you're kind of like, I don't know if I'm buying that watch just for that function.
Anyway, that was a long intro, but our topic today, in fact, Todd, you intro this because this was a video that you watched and we were discussing it, and I totally agree with this, but you did the heavy lifting and watched Jody's video on this.
Well, it wasn't heavy lifting. I enjoy Jody's videos, but it was an interesting take, and it's one of his most current videos right now, where he is making the assertion that we are going to see a resurgence this year of quartz watches, particularly in the microbrand sector, that there is a reason quartz is so beloved, but also that you can get into high precision, high quality quartz from companies like ETA and other Swiss brands that are out there, for just like you can get the ubiquitous Mecha quartz that every microbrand had for their chronograph, or the NH35. You could go and now say, like, I've got a Swiss made movement in a watch that you're going to get for $400-$500 now. And I know that there's a whole contingent of people who are going to be angry, but the quartz has a lot of merit, and quartz belongs in everybody's collection. And I'm going to put up an assertion, and we can talk about this, that most normal people who just have a watch would rather have a quartz watch. I'm just saying it.
I think that most average watch buyers have no idea that mechanical watches are still made.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. That's so I have two stories for that. I remember I'm a child. I was kind of coming into buying my watches and stuff in the 80s. I was a teenager, and my grandpa had given me a mechanical pocket watch, and I thought that was the coolest thing, but I never even considered that there were watches without batteries when I was shopping for watches. It wasn't even a consideration. Like, they all are quartz. It's funny how you kind of get into it and you're like, oh, there's this whole other world. So I was on a job down in Florida, and I do video support sometimes for my job, and we were having an event. There was a guy down there I was working with, and I was looking, and I was like, oh, he's got a really cool vintage watch on. I complimented it, and he goes, oh yeah, I like it, because it's not moving. I've got to get the battery changed. And I looked at him, and I was like, can I see your watch? And he gave it to me, and I looked at it, and I just wound the crown a couple times. I said, you don't need a battery. This is just a manual wind watch. He's like, are you kidding me? No, it's fine. It's not broken. I said it might need a service, because if you didn't know that, I don't know how long it's been without a service. But like you said, to the broader scope, I don't think people are even conscious or thinking like, mechanical watch, what does that mean? Yeah, mine's mechanical. It's got hands.
Totally agree with you. And my Speedmaster that I wore for a long time, I knew that was mechanical because it was like the original watches. I'd always worn quartz before then, but I had this manual wind for 10 years. And then when I started getting into watches, when I moved to the US, this was a year or so before I started the YouTube channel, was when I started to really research it. I think I was amazed that there were so many mechanical watches available. And I think even back then as well, I was amazed at how many mechanical watches were, but there was nowhere near as many as there was now. I mean, Citizen I think had one mechanical watch, which was a diver that looked a bit like, do you remember that one? It looked a bit like a Panerai shrouded crown. Do you remember that Citizen? I think that was the only one that they had in their whole catalogue that had a mechanical movement in it that you could buy from Citizen. It was a high-end diver that they had. It had a shrouded crown or a protected crown like on a Panerai, but nothing else was mechanical in Citizens. The same with Seiko didn't have. I mean, they might have been selling the SKX, but and they had one or two others, but I think there's been a lot of brands have really embraced mechanical again, haven't they? Even though they were solely quartz. But yeah, I agree. I was amazed that there were so many mechanical watches when I started getting into it. And I think that most people when they're buying a watch don't realize that, if you're not in there, they don't realize that, just I guess the prevalence of mechanical.
That, and what's funny too is I go back to the normies. One of my best friends, she had a Lady Aquaterra, and she loved it. And then she was like, I think it's time for me to get a new watch. And I talked her into getting the mechanical version. I said, you should get this. This is way cooler. It's got more heritage. It's just, if you're going to get the same watch, at least get the mechanical version. And it was about 2 or 3 weeks after she got it. She loved it. It's a beautiful watch. She's like 2 or 3 weeks later, she's like, I don't understand. It's like 30 seconds behind. And I'm like, well, it's a mechanical watch. Like, you have to adjust it every couple of days, like, if you want to keep perfect time. And she just was blown away. She was like, I thought I was getting a better watch. This doesn't keep good time. That's not a good watch to me. And, that was, it was a complete eye-opener for me because, again, I had gone so far into the mechanical rabbit hole. I enjoy the moment where I'm setting the watch every couple of days and tracking it and seeing how well my watch is keeping time. A normal person just wants to put it on and have it tell the time. They do not care about this thing that us weirdos like.
Yeah, it is interesting. Now, I've definitely going more back to the appreciation of quartz. I don't really even think about whether a watch is mechanical or quartz when I'm looking at it. It wouldn't put me off either way. It wouldn't put me off either way if it was mechanical or quartz. Whereas I think when I started watch collecting, if I saw it was quartz, that would put me off. I'd be like, oh, that's a shame. But now I think after reviewing so many watches and owning so many and then having a lot of those entry-level Seikos, for me, I've never had one that kept good time. The SKX and the 4R35s and the 6R35s. I know people, the 6R36s, I know people often comment on this saying, oh, mine runs within a couple of seconds a day. Well, that's good, but I've never had that. I've never had a Seiko that ran well. NH35, actually, surprisingly, I've had some that really run well, but, that's TMI. But
well, and it's I think I've said this before on the podcast, that knowing what I know now and having heard Dave say this, who I would consider much more expertise in any way than I would be in watches, and having the experience of servicing chronograph being the most complicated movement you can get in a watch, which was fascinating to me. But now that I think about it and having talked to Dave, all of the others, even with all of the complications, they're still kind of going off this gear train. And it's just about the gearing for whatever complication you want to put in it. Whereas the chronograph is this sort of double setup, and they're finicky. They are expensive to service, especially on a good quality one. I'm talking $800, to service.
Yep, mine was $879 for my Speedmaster.
Yeah, I love chronographs, and I think going forward, I have a couple mechanicals, but as I go, I think I'm exclusively looking for just quartz chronographs because I love them, but I don't like that expense at the other end of that tunnel. And I think it's an interesting proposition for a microbrand because I don't have to worry about mechanical problems with the movement. As I ship it off to customers, I'm sure the return rate's going to be much lower. Customer gets a watch that keeps great time. No one's sitting there going like, oh man, this thing loses 30 seconds a day. Cuts that danger element for a microbrand who really can't afford to do a lot of returns. The one he showed, I forget the name of it, but they called themselves the Korean Grand Seiko. It was a beautiful watch, ticking hand, whatever. Beautiful watch, really nice bracelet with like a push button on the clasp that'll let for micro adjust. So you don't have to take it off to adjust the bracelet. And so you're getting a lot of watch, even though it doesn't have the mechanical movement, for a very good price. And he even indicated that he bought, I think, 300 of those ETA Swiss Quartz movements. So he's got something coming, his own.
Oh, nice.
That will be a quartz watch as well.
Yeah, because they're like thermocompensated, aren't they, and stuff like that, which is, if anybody's not remember, like quartz, mechanical, but quartz also could be affected by the temperature of your skin, couldn't it?
Oh, yeah. Well, and this one, here's another benefit. It was a 68-month power reserve on the battery, and it was plus minus 10 seconds per year. Like, that's about as good as it gets.
If I bought a Grand Seiko again, I would definitely buy one of the quartz ones. I do look for quartz. There is some pluses and minuses to quartz, which I think we should definitely talk about. I'm not going to go off on a tirade about mecha quartz because I've said enough about it on the channel. I cannot stand the 2-dial mecha quartz with the 30-minute counter, the 24-hour sub-dial, and then the no running seconds. And then I've heard all of the arguments for, well, it will do a fifth of a second. I'm sorry, it's a complete cop-out using that VK64. And I was speaking to a brand, I won't say who the brand is, but they were saying, oh, it's more affordable to do it as a microbrand and stuff like that. I'm like, come on, I'm not having it. I'm over it, but well, I won't go on about that. But the pluses and minuses are, I really like, if you get a high-end quartz watch, they're extremely accurate. Breitling does some amazing stuff, but the problem is, versus a mechanical watch, is a lot of times those you can't service them. They're once they're done, a lot of times once a quartz watch dies, I mean, it's dead.
Yeah, you have to replace the movement. The other bad thing that admittedly is, and I have probably 4 in my collection right now, it just dies on you. And then you have to go like, okay, I find the battery. You can't just wind them up, which is the huge benefit of a mechanical watch, that it doesn't die.
I've got a box full of
like that.
I've got a box full of batteries, and they're all variants of the 300. There's like a 392, 376. Watch brands never standardized on a watch battery. Sometimes you get a huge, like some of the G-Shocks take the massive battery, those 10-year batteries of the CR2032s or whatever. Yeah, that's why I really like the solar watches. But sometimes the solar quartz, the speed timer, the date is really buried quite far back there.
They shouldn't have bothered with the date on that one. I love that watch, but they really shouldn't have bothered with the date.
Yeah, it's quite far back there. I mean, Citizen does some great... I mean, those Eco Drive movements are absolutely fantastic.
I've got another one in my collection. I'm blown away by it. It's another Pilot watch. I forget the name of it. I'll wear it for one of the other wrist checks. But it's also just a normal like 3-hander, but it's a world timer and a perpetual calendar. You never even have to set the date. It knows the date, and it's a phenomenal watch, and I think I got it for $200, $250.
Yeah, because they use atomic, don't they, on some of those? A G-Shock do it as well, don't they? They have atomic.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure. I think
this one's not atomic. It's just mechanical.
Oh, well.
Perpetual quartz. It's just geared.
Oh, that's really
perpetual.
cool. Yeah, I think Casio on the is it Oceanus or whatever, their high end line, their sort of equivalent of Grand Seiko is. I think they have atomic on there, or GPS timekeeping. Seiko do as well, where it does it off a GPS signal as well. So extremely accurate, isn't it? My boss at work, he recently got a Citizen that had atomic timekeeping, and he lives in Denver. And I said, you couldn't be living anywhere better, because I think the mast is still in Fort Collins, isn't it? I like it when brands now do quartz and mechanical versions. So we just had this with Pauling watches that are reviewed, and Veya, the guys are Ryan and Reagan over at Veya, who, full disclosure, they have sent me review watches in the past, but they have a lot of their watches, their dive watches, and then field watches that are available in mechanical quartz and then a solar quartz. So they really, really cool. And I think more brands, maybe this is what Jody's getting at as well, is that maybe more brands could offer both options, because also a lot of the micro brands, they're very narrow focused, aren't they? They have a lot of NH35, which is a good movement, but I think oftentimes, I commented on this in the last Phoebus review, that their cases and everything have got so good that they need to, I think that case deserves a better, not better, well, yeah, more the next tier up in excellence, like a Miyota or something like that, but also a quartz would be really cool as well. And you can get quartz that have a sweeping second hand, sort of.
Bulova does a lot of those, and I have one of those, and it's awesome. I mean, it chews through the battery a little faster, but the one I have is a remake of that weird one they made that was static charge, making the Accutron. So it was a reissue of the Accutron, but it's quartz, but it uses their precisionist movement and this sweeping second hand. It's awesome.
You've just got me. I'm just going to go off another tangent. I was reading a great article. If anybody doesn't subscribe to the Watches of Espionage Instagram and mailing list, they did a great review. They did a great article on somebody, I forget who it was now, but I'll leave a link in the description, where they oil filled those $15 Casios, the F90, the F91. Is it? And because they'd oil filled it, they took it 15,000 meters below the sea or something, and they said they could have gone deeper, because the oil, the oil just stops any pressure building up in the watch that would cause the crystal to fail. And it reminds me, when you said about the battery failing fast, that Zinn do an oil filled quartz 3-hander, don't they? And I think they have to overtalk those, don't they? And I think Marathon do it as well to compensate for the tritium tubes on there. But
the friction of that, of moving through the oil.
Yeah, the drag of it,
The drag, that's a better way of putting it, yeah. Yeah, no, it's a cool idea, but I never thought about it, because also you have one of those watches, you're not taking care of it yourself. Like, that has to go back to the factory. I don't think even the local watchmaker could deal with that.
No, I have actually thought about, I told Russell, Mad Watch Collector, that he should, because this is right up his street with his, he does so well with his Casio stuff. I said you should oil fill one of these watches just for your audience. I could probably do it on my channel. Maybe I'll oil fill a G-Shock or something just to see if it works.
Were you going to take it to 5,000 feet?
Oh yeah, Kim. I wonder how I would do that. Do you know, an actual YouTube consultant? I went to an evening, and it was when I was living in California. It was getting started with YouTube, and it was a guy called Daryl Eves who was famous for, he actually got Mr. Beast kind of started. Jimmy, Mr. Beast started.
Okay.
Daryl Eves was, he's one of the OG YouTubers that made videos to help YouTubers grow, essentially. And he was there, he was doing the talk, and afterwards we pulled my channel up. This was years and years ago. I had less than 5,000 subs at the time. I had like 4,000. He pulled it up. He was giving me some options. But that's what he said to me. He said, if you want to blow up, put a watch on a weather balloon and just send it into space. And it probably would have done it. I know people have done it with Speedmasters and stuff, but the problem is you have to go into the desert, don't you? If that thing flies off course on the way back down, 10 miles drift by a sort of, if you're a degree out or whatever, and then what watch would you send into space and stuff? But quite funny.
Right. No, who was it that was doing that? There was somebody, I want to feel like, who was dropping him out of a helicopter or something? Was that Teddy? Teddy did that?
Maybe. I know somebody sent a Speedmaster up, and they sent, I think there was like a video screen, and one of Oisin O'Malley's reviews of the Speedmaster was playing or something. It was I know a few people have done it with watches, and I know Elliot Brown which is what this guy did with the Casio, oil-filled Casio, but Elliot Brown have strapped their watches to an ROV, those autonomous, not that I don't think they're not autonomous, but they're ocean rovers or whatever, the unmanned submarines.
Now that you say that, I can't believe somebody hadn't put one on the Mars rover with NASA just for the marketing capacity of it, like paid X amount to sponsor the mission just to
Omega
put their watch on the arm. Yeah,
that's right. But I suppose that they probably account for every single gram, don't they? And they were like, no, we haven't got
well, that's true. That is true.
But you're right. That would have been Omega. That would have been one hell of an Omega outfit, wouldn't they?
First watch on the Mars would have been on the Mars. How old am I? I'm suddenly like an 80-year-old guy. A first watch on Mars would have been awesome.
Oh, well, yeah, unless a couple of years later aliens come down and they take over all of our computers. Oh, we reverse engineered this watch that you left. They reverse engineered this tiny computer that you had on the Mars rover, and now we've taken over all of your...
Oh, we're in trouble anyway because Deep Sea just took over AI.
Oh,
so
Deep Sea,
we're
I've been having a play with it versus ChatGPT, and I think what makes it what's going to make it win is it's polite when it replies back to you, isn't it? It's like friendly to you. It's like, oh yeah, no, I just had a look into it, and yeah, that is what I think the answer is. Let me know if that's okay. Whereas ChatGPT is still has that separation that you are talking to an AI, whereas DeepSeek is a little bit more it's a social engineering, isn't it? Social hacking.
Even scarier, as the transcript is sent off to the Chinese government for you.
So do we think... I mean, microbrands, there's definitely a lot. I still get hit up by a lot of them. And I know that even this gentleman that was messaging me about the Mecha Quartz, I even replied back to him. I know that it's extremely difficult. A lot of them are like one-man bands, or they're two people, or it's like a group of people that have got together. So I understand why they use Mecha Quartz. It's just I don't personally like it, but it doesn't mean anybody else doesn't have to. But I do think that we do need to socialize Quartz being better, because I think the microbrands will also be able to get better because of it as well, because Quartz will allow people to get a lot more experimental, perhaps, with the microbrand.
Oh, I think so too. I think it's just going to require a sales pitch to the audience, because it's a conundrum for the microbrands, because the microbrands are selling to the weirdos like you and me. They're not selling to the normies. So now it's trying to convince people that this is why this is a good decision or a good addition to your collection, and have to really pump up that pitch because they're selling to the weirdos. They're not in a department store.
Yes, exactly. No, I agree. And I think that also, I don't know this for a fact, but I think you alluded to it. I think it would probably, I'm guessing there is some customer support issue, isn't there, with doing mechanical watches, because there is so much variant.
We talked about that even with one of my favorite brands, Christopher Ward. Like, that has got to be a challenge, even as big as they are now. Just dealing with, they have that generous 5-year warranty, and people are people, and people are taking advantage. When I was younger, one of my first jobs at a department store, and people would return I sold ladies' shoes, and women would come back. I remember this one lady came back, and there were like razor blade cuts on the back of the heel, and I'm like, you can't return these. She's like, well, they split on me, and I'm like, that's not how leather splits. But it's just, those are sliced with a razor blade. Ultimately, my manager we took it back because the customer's always right. And I can imagine the amount of garbage Christopher Ward has to deal with coming back from people. A Microbrand, like you said, one-man band. Ugh, keeping up with the emails, keeping up with everything else, and then having to this one's broken, this one's broken.
Yeah, and I, for me personally as well, why I'm sort of liking Quartz. And I mean, I will still always have mechanical watches. I still do. I've got my Braymont and all that. But I do get stressed if the watch is over 10 seconds fast or slow a day. I still can't compute in my head spending a couple of grand on a watch and it not being within a couple of seconds a day. And I've come to right or wrong. I'm probably wrong, but that's just I think I just know myself now that I just don't enjoy having a watch. I would sell a watch. I would sell a Seiko, and I have done if it over 10 because it was over 10 seconds a day fast, and I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't
deal with it.
Yeah, that's why I do have a time grapher now, but I seldom put watches on it because I don't want to stress myself out.
Ruin your life.
Yeah, and also it's difficult to do. I don't put time grapher results in, and I don't time watches that are sent in for review, and I don't put them on a time grapher and show it in a review. Very rarely do I do it because there's so much variance, isn't there? It's not like you can say, okay, well, this watch is 2 seconds plus or minus a day. Yours is going to be the same because it'll vary. Quartz doesn't vary from if you're in Macy's or whatever, and you're buying a quartz, you're choosing between two different colors of a quartz watch, a quartz Seiko. They're still going to keep the same amount of time. But if you literally like look at the drawer with pulling a Seiko out, you could have one that's perfect time or one that's like 10 or 15 seconds. Either way, it's look at the drawer, and I don't like that aspect to it. Even though the mechanical Seikos, they're just so good looking. They're better looking than the quartz ones, I think, at the moment.
And that's the thing. I think the energy gets put into them, and they are better looking. But hopefully we'll see some changes. I was going to say, if you started using that time graph for all your watches, this is going to turn into Quartz watch talk.
Yeah, Quartz watch talk, yeah.
You'd be over it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was a bit more of a ramble about Quartz watching than a structured bit, but it was a lot of fun. Let us know if you enjoyed it. So, Todd, we'll see everyone next week.
Looking forward to it. We'll see you soon.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Leave a comment, like, and subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform. Email us over at casualwatchtalk@gmail.com if there's something you want us to cover. And we'll see you next time on Casual Watch Talk Podcast. Thanks, guys. Bye.
See you later. Bye.